Hey,
Interesting. Hello. You're muted.
Yeah. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
good morning.
Ah,
But I feel like we just need to start with like some like ground rules first.
all right, let's do this.
Particularly for you, can we say where you work?
No.
I didn't think so. Notice, I don't think I previously mentioned this, but you may have noticed that we called it beer talk.
Yeah.
Right. So Dion and I both have beers. I hate
You know,
IPAs.
if it wasn't 9 a.m. in California, I too would have a beer.
I feel like we need a healthy round of like introduction here, and then we'll just kind of get going on today's main topic and episode 2, beer talk.
Exciting
Beer
stuff.
talk.
Talk
Beer talk. Hey.
special guest. So I'm gonna let you introduce yourself first, and then Dion and I will say something goofy, I'm sure.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So
Can
like,
do
who do you
that.
work for? Where do you come from? Why do we know each other? Why are you
Yeah. Um, so I'm just gonna say that I work in the food and agricultural space.
Great.
I think that's like the best way to say it. Um, the other thing I wanted to mention, so since we're talking about the farmers' protest today, so I've been like pretty active in staying on top of like what's happening and trying to raise awareness in the U.S. For people who aren't connected to India in any way. So like that's kind of my experience. I am in no way like in a position to speak on behalf of anything that's happening in India, but definitely can shed a light on what's happening and why we should care and why everyone should care. So just wanted to put that out there as like a clarification. So I'll just share that.
Yeah, for sure.
Started.
Dion, the reason I even reached out was because I don't know if you know anything about the farmers' protests, the strikes that are happening in India. I had only loosely known about it from like I follow like Vox video and things like that, and I see it, and I'd seen little bits, clips here and there, and I was like, this is about agriculture and this is about food, and it seems like a pretty like there's a lot of people who are involved and affected by this, and I feel like I should know more, and I'm not sure why I don't know more, and I feel like I should care more, and I don't know why I don't care more. And the exact way that Nap just put it was like connecting us people in our kind of circle and our communities, connecting them to something that seems like really far off. And so she's kind of like our resident expert today on that.
President.
You know, even though you said you're not.
Between 3 people, I will take that title.
Yeah.
There you go.
So,
All right.
where do we know each other from?
You and I?
Yeah, where do you-
College. Oh yeah, I'll share that. Yeah, Miami. Nothing specific other than we have mutual friends, I guess. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what did you study at Miami?
Ooh, nothing that I work in now. Zoology.
Hey.
Yeah.
Far off.
That's lit.
Yeah, I guess. I am like so far from that hard science like field now. So
Yeah.
But you get to tell your kids that you're a zoologist though, so that's still pretty dope.
do I? Do I get to do that? I guess.
Oh yeah. If your diploma on your wall, zoology, it happened.
Honestly, I don't even know what happened to my degree.
Doesn't matter.
I went off to grad school and I like forgot everything about Miami.
It still exists.
What'd
What'd you study in grad school?
I went to Duke and I studied science policy and bioethics.
So you're a bioethnic zoologist.
Sure, we can.
Sounds right to me.
It's a fact. Like literally, you did that.
I studied specifically food policy and food ethics, so that's kind of how I'm at where I'm at, I guess.
That's so
Fish. Fish are friends, not food.
That's really cool.
Yeah, that is dope.
Dion, what do you care about? Why are you here? What are we talking about? Introduce yourself.
This is weird. Who am I? I am Dion Price. That's Joe over there. By the way, we're friends. We've been friends since we've been friends since high school, but we've known each other since 8th grade. I was a new kid in town, so nobody really liked me when I first came around because I was fast.
No,
running
it's not because
wise.
you were fast. It's because he wore silver contacts. He wore gray contacts. That's why.
Gosh.
So before the contacts came around, I was fast, and they didn't like me already, and then they didn't like me more.
If you met someone who had gray contacts, you wouldn't like them either. Today, if you at any point in time, you'd be like, this guy has gray contacts. I don't like him.
I don't think I've ever liked anyone with colored contacts ever. So it's a thing. I don't know what it is, but it's a thing.
I mean, I can look back and say that it was weird, definitely experimental, but hey, it's middle school. It is what it is. So, you know, all the way around, I was the new kid on the block that nobody liked, whether it was because of contacts or because I was more athletic than they wanted me to be.
Stop it.
The second one. But no. So, so me and Joe have been good friends for a really long time. I work in the sport and entertainment industry here in Atlanta, Georgia, crowd management, security, different things like that. So, done a lot of things. And I actually studied sports management in school, so I'm still technically in my box.
Nice.
And
I went to the University of South Dakota.
USD.
You.
As Dion mentioned, I've known him technically since 8th grade. I'm not sure the very first time I would have seen you or met you or something like that at Miami University, but yeah, we just had mutual friends, and being connected on like social media, you start to see as people kind of develop, grow, get older, all those kinds of things, you start to see like the things that people like really care about and all that kind of stuff. And it was clear over the last like month that you super care about what's happening, right? In India and especially around that space. And then knowing that you work in, I forget exactly how you put it, food and policy space or something like that. Obviously, like you're super connected to that, not just on a personal level, but on a career level as well. And what triggered me was I had mentioned to you, I bought, a small farm, and I'm in this, really interesting space right now where I feel pulled in so many different directions on like what to do with it. I feel, pulled in the direction of sustainability, thinking about, I just feel responsible. I feel obligated now. I'm like, okay, now that I'm a landowner, I feel like I've just been catapulted into this conversation of climate change, of sustainability, of, regenerational, carbon farming, all those kind of things, regenerative farming, and just this huge thing, right? And understanding how we as people are connected to our food and where our food comes from. There's a whole culture around farming, and especially here in America. And it's one of those things where I feel like the vast majority of people don't know and also really don't care where their food comes from. And yet food is to say essential to our life is an understatement. I don't even know how to overstate how important food is to who we are as people, from a health and well-being, and just if you go too many days without it, you'll die. You know what I mean? You can't overstate how important it is. And yet it's this fascinating commodity where we've learned how to make food-like items, right? Chicken nuggets that aren't really made out of chicken, or beef, which I love beef and I love plant-based meat, right? There's like proper ways to potentially do it and not proper ways to potentially do it. And so I feel like the whole sphere of anything agriculture, life, food, and anything that's connected to that is kind of where I want to just pick up the conversation. And so I don't know, I feel like it's best to start with you just kind of, to the best of your one person experience ability, just kind of educate us, for the next few minutes on what's happening in India, why you care about it, how did we get to where we are, and maybe how it potentially affects the rest of us, and we'll just spin off from there. Does that sound good?
Yeah, that sounds really good. That's great.
I forgot my cards.
You have your what?
I forgot my cards. Joe know what I'm talking about.
Oh.
Go, and that was beer talk. Ha! And that was beer talk. Ha! Stop. I didn't mean with the card. Don't do that. Don't. No.
Stop the recording.
We're not going to stop.
Bro, that was the
recording on
perfect way to
that.
end it.
It's
Why?
Not the perfect recording.
Okay, fine. That was the last card.
Yeah, so I think, so just a little personal background. I actually come from a family of farmers who farmed land in India, in Punjab region. Not good?
It tastes like what we're going to be talking about.
Food?
Continue.
It tastes like farming, Joe.
I didn't understand the farming joke, but I'll get there. I'll slowly start to pick up on
It's
all
an IPA, so it tastes like grass.
Oh,
I
okay.
can't stand IPAs.
Oh, really? I love IPAs.
Of course you do. Of course everyone does. You millennials.
Okay,
I love IPAs.
Pause real quick. In the spirit of beer talk. Before we go too deep, Joe's beer palate is very baby, okay? Very unsophisticated. He doesn't understand. So he's drinking the IPA, making squinty faces like he's freaking eating old limes. But it's okay. He'll get there. So I just had to remind the people that Joe has a very infantile beer palate. But continue along.
Yeah, I don't even know where I was.
You were nowhere yet.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
You were saying how you're connected and where your family's from.
Yeah. So my family is from Punjab, which is one of the farming regions in India. And I come from a family of farmers. So my grandfather used to farm his land. Currently, like the land that my family does own, it's farmed by farm workers who are also greatly impacted by the bills that were passed in India. But that's just like my background and my personal connection to what's happening. But so back in September, India passed 3 farm laws, which basically, the details of it, I will share a link, which you could share out in addition to this Zoom video, because I just won't, do a good job of explaining it. But essentially it's taking all control, potentially could take all control from farmers and put it in the hands of corporations. Like that's essentially what would be the long-term outcome of the farm laws. Farming in India it is in need of major reform. But the way that the reform is being done is essentially taking control from farmers. So that's a problem because India is it has a large, agricultural economy. So it would impact hundreds of millions of people.
Would you, from what I've heard or what I understand, those 3 laws that were passed, simply at just different stages in the farming process are deregulating it, right? That allow big commercial farmers and like things like that to come in and potentially put the farm workers in unfavorable positions because they have all the leverage. Does that kind of potentially
yeah
the 3 laws?
So I mean, I guess at the heart, that is exactly it. So at the heart of the problem, there's been this thing called MSP. It's a minimum support price. It's similar to how in the US we provide subsidies for crops. So farmers can go to these specific markets that are government run, and essentially they will always get their crops at like a certain rate. Now what is basically going to happen, and just to clarify, MSP has never been a part of the law. So it's always just kind of been like, that's been the policy. So people always argue, well, it was never law. Like then it's not like it's being removed, but essentially what's happening is farmers can now go and sell their crops to anyone and at any price, for there's no minimum support price for that. And so the government's argument is, well, we're allowing farmers to go and sell to whoever they want. But the farmers' argument is that, well, eventually the minimum support price markets are just going to go away. And so we're going to be fighting to sell to corporations, and they're eventually not going to offer what they were offered at the MSP rate. So that's essentially like the biggest problem for farmers right now. And so just going back on, farmers losing control, there are corporations currently that have a lot of interest in expanding into the agricultural market. So the two names that have been thrown around are Ambani and Adani. I can also share their corporations and what their interests are in a separate link as well. I won't do a good job of explaining that, but there are corporations that have a lot of interest in expanding, and these corporations have ties to like the likes of Facebook and Google. So there's a lot of international interest in expanding into the agricultural market in India as well.
So the way that you just kind of phrase that, Dion, you have something?
Yeah, I wasn't quite sure. So the farmers want the MSP or they don't? They want it.
Yeah, they do. They want the MSP.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. They want the MSP, and so that's a minimum price that they're offered, but there's still a lot of farmers, even with MSP, that still struggle. Like, farmers aren't wealthy in India. It's not like, farmers around the world are struggling, and they are in India too, but this is just like accelerating their struggle.
Yeah.
Introducing these 3 farm laws. So.
Okay.
So the way that you just phrased it almost makes it sound, and tell me if this is a completely unfair comparison, but it almost makes it sound like the opposite of what's happening with coffee. Like, coffee has always been one of those really sensitive subjects as far as like the farming practices and sustainability and making sure the farmers get fair pay and all that kind of stuff. And it's traditionally always been not in the farmer's best interest. They get paid almost next to nothing, right? And then it's a super high commodity at the other end of the spectrum. And obviously there's been a lot of progress that's been made to fix some of that. And this almost sounds like these are taking steps back, right? Where it's like they actually did have some regulation and policy and things like that in place. And where farming is happening in India, it's almost like, is that a fair comparison? Are we taking like steps backwards towards like similar to like what the coffee industry has gone through?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I guess you could say it's kind of like the opposite of what's happening to coffee now. Because now everyone is interested in buying fair trade, right? Making sure that the coffee has like certain labels on it so that it can, that that the farmers that are farming that are being paid fairly. That, I guess you could say it's like what's happening in India is kind of taking steps back, right? But I also want to say that there are 2 states that are pretty largely impacted, Punjab and Haryana, and they have strong MSP. They have strong markets where they get the MSP. There are other states in India that have already gotten rid of MSP. So those farmers have been struggling far greater for many, many years now. So I had mentioned earlier that MSP is not, it's not a law. So it's been operating in certain states, whereas other states, they've gotten rid of MSP. So they've already been struggling and basically been receiving like not enough to sustain their farms. There's farmers that are in debt. There are farmers that have been committing suicide because they are in debt. So that's like a whole nother conversation that we can get into.
Glad that you mentioned because I was going to ask about that. That was one of the things that I heard about was the rate of suicide. I mean, I could be making this number up, but I feel like it was in the thousands.
Yeah.
Have committed suicide because of how much debt that they're in. Is that an accurate number?
I've seen numbers all over the place. I think that we don't have accurate numbers of how many farmers commit suicide. They could be higher, they could be slightly lower. I would doubt that they are lower than the numbers that are being reported, because farmers are in a very, very bad place, and it, like, there's always, I feel like every month, every week, you hear about a farmer that committed suicide because they just could not pay their debts back. Part of it has to do with Monsanto's involvement in India in the years prior. So there's that whole conversation as well, where you did have a big corporation, a big biotech company essentially coming into India, and then farmers were indebted to this big corporation, and there were a lot of suicides that followed after that because they could not pay off their debts. So
that's crazy.
The one thing about the farmers issue in India right now is that this is not something new. Farmers have been protesting for decades in India. What's happening right now is obviously protesting against the 3 farm laws, but there's a history of farmers' issues, agricultural issues in India. So we can have a lot of conversations about a lot of different things because farmers have been struggling for decades now. So, but if you have like specific questions, happy to talk about it.
Yeah, I have a question. Right now, is it, I guess, what would be like the mix of, I guess I would say like private farms to like corporate farms in India in general? Is it fairly diverse, or is it?
Yeah, so I think because we're in the US, we're so used to seeing large corporate farms, right? Big farms. That is not, I can't confidently say like what the breakdown is, but most farms are privately held. Most farmers own less than 3 acres of land. And so they're farming like very small pieces of land. So that's another issue, is that most of the farmers in India are small farmers. So a small farmer isn't going to cross state lines to go find the best price, right? You're not going to take like your small amount of produce to go sell it somewhere else because you're getting a better price. That's just not going to happen. It's not going to be worthwhile to you.
Profitable.
It's cost prohibitive.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly. So, and then you get rid of MSP, and now you're stuck selling at whatever rate you can find, because you have to sell your produce.
Gotcha. So yeah, that's where I was going to go next with, if within those states that you said have kind of already gotten rid of the MSP, taking into account if you're a private farm or possibly a corporate farm, those are the farmers who are, like you said, getting hurt the most. But I think there's probably an interesting situation that could end up being a thing, maybe not, especially if more corporations do come in. That is related kind of, Joe, to that coffee piece that you brought up, is that if, let's say, all of these laws go through, MSP is instated on a national, countrywide level, however that works, and then corporations do come in, now from the corporation standpoint, they have to sell these crops at MSP, therefore most likely negatively affecting the farm workers, because I have to, like the coffee situation in South America, I have to pay you cents on the dollar, less than pennies, in order to still profit as a corporation and sell at this minimum price. So yeah, I think that's interesting, I guess I'll say.
Do you have any idea if this like affects us in America or in other countries in any specific way? Like, is India a big, exporter of rice and grain and those kinds of things? Like,
actually, if you go on U.S. Trade Office's website, it'll show you exactly how much we import from India. I think the largest, or I guess what we import the most of, is rice from India. So definitely, I think the U.S. and Canada have had a lot of interest in I guess, speaking out against MSP. there's been a lot of like international conversation around that MSP is too high and that, you know, it's driving up the price of crops. It's in comparison to other countries. So when I see silence on the international, I guess at the international level from countries, I do think about the fact that there are a lot of countries that have interest in making sure that MSP no longer exists because they are, you know, having to buy crops at a certain price. And, you know, the US and I'm aware of the US and Canada's involvement, but I'm sure there's other countries who import from India as well who would like to see MSP gone for good, which is, you know, it's really unfortunate because we almost remove the human component from this, right? This is a labor issue. It's a labor movement issue as well. And we're removing the person, the people, the hundreds of millions of people that are being impacted by these new laws, and essentially just diluting it to, oh, well, this is progress. This is the way that agriculture needs to move forward. This is how it's happened in the US. This is how it's happening all over the world. But we're essentially removing the human component, the impact on the people who are essentially, you know, buried under debt. And there's no reform happening on that end at all.
So this might be too big of a question to try to answer, but outside of, you know, just educating people, sharing this video and somebody else, even just one or two or whatever, people learning something about the situation across the world that they didn't previously know about, is there something that people can actually do, or is it just a learning experience?
Yeah. So that's always a hard question to answer, given this particular movement. So there's other things that I think that we should definitely talk about before we answer the question of what can you do. I think the number one thing is, first, it's really important not just to know what's happening in India, but just on a global level. What is happening with farming? What is happening in agriculture? And I think India is a great example to learn from, because these are changes that every country has gone through. But India, farmers in India are saying, nope, we're not about to be the next country that's going through these changes, because essentially you're removing the farmers out of the picture. So I think the number one thing is to learn, is educate yourself, learn about what's happening in India, learn about the bills, the farm laws, learn about you know, what's in them, why they negatively impact the farmers. And then I'm assuming the audience here is largely based in the US, so learn about agricultural issues in the US and how you can help, whether that's, you know, supporting small farms, shopping locally, all of those things. Those are all really important to help the small farmer. So that's like the basic level. But then since the farmers' protests have started, which I think it would be important for us to shift that conversation to the protest itself. There are a lot of things that are happening, a lot of human rights violations that are happening, that have been happening in India for many years under the current government, under the current prime minister. And now we're seeing them again in the farmers' protests. And when the question is asked, what can I do? I think it's important to have that conversation around how you can reach out to your elected officials and make sure that they're condemning India for all the things that they're doing against farmers. But if we're ready, we can shift the conversation about, you know, what's been happening on the ground in the last 90 days.
Gotcha. Just like pressure.
Yeah, so
people have a voice to put pressure on a particular.
Right, they have the right to protest. They have the right to, you know, they have basically every right that you would imagine in the US. Those same rights exist in India. India is the world's most populous democracy. Well, it's not really, I would not call it a democracy right now, and I wouldn't have called it in the last like 5 or 6 years. But I think that, you know, there's a lot of rights that are being violated. So let me just give a quick update on what's happening right now. So we're about to hit March. Farmers have been protesting, hundreds of thousands of farmers. So think about all of the BLM marches this past summer, combine all of those, and that's how many people have been protesting for 90 plus days straight.
Mm.
And I don't mean that they leave their home and they come to a protest site. They are living.
Yeah, they live there, right?
Say that again?
They live there, right? Like I think I saw that they went and they're occupying this like
the borders of Delhi, which is the nation's capital. So they brought their tractors, their trailers. There's organizations such as Khalsa Aid, which I recommend everyone to go and learn about. It's an incredible organization. They have been on the ground helping set up tents, set up comfortable like living arrangements. So there are hundreds of thousands of farmers on 3, maybe more than 3 borders around Delhi, and they have been there for over 90 days. And so I think when most people think of India, they think, okay, well, it's winter time, maybe the weather's comfortable. It gets really cold in Delhi, like 30 degrees at nighttime. And these people are sleeping outside. Farmers are sleeping outside. And a lot of these farmers are 60 plus. Over 200 farmers have either died due to harsh living conditions because of the weather, or other illnesses that were made worse because of the living conditions. Farmers have committed suicide at the borders, and essentially the government has done nothing in terms of trying to negotiate with them. So they've still been there. But what's happened in those 90 plus days? We have seen excessive police brutality. All police brutality is excessive, but when I say that, I mean like police just coming into protest sites, beating up farmers, beating up journalists, beating up activists, police abducting activists and journalists and farmers and throwing them in prison, essentially without due process. There are people who have gone missing during these protests. There's just so much that has happened. People have been killed by the police. There are, every day there are people that are being arrested based on false charges. So that is currently happening. That is the one thing that the government is doing well, is making sure that they can, lock up people indefinitely. What else has been happening? So when they initially started to come into the borders of Delhi, they were tear gas, they were water cannoned, they were beat with sticks, and this is all happening during peaceful protests. So we saw some of this. I think that it's really important for us in the US because we saw a summer of protests this last summer in 2020. And we saw a lot of police brutality, right, under Donald Trump. You saw what happened in DC where peaceful protesters were tear gassed, and they were all basically because Trump wanted to have this like photo op, right? And you saw police just in riot gear, SWAT gear, essentially looking like military. That's basically what's happening in India, but it's, I want to say, like on a much greater scale, because you basically don't see any remnants of democracy in India anymore, where you still had some of that here. So that's.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, based off of kind of like what you said, I do want to shift the conversation a little bit towards, like you said, people here in the U.S. and how we think about farming, how we think about agriculture, using this kind of experience as a learning milestone and whatnot. I'll just start for myself and just say, like I kind of said earlier, I've been kind of conflicted on like, all right, we got this land. I feel catapulted from one day to the next that I'm a part of this conversation, even though I'm not doing anything with it yet. But thinking about, food, well-being, health, wellness, mental health, all those kinds of things on U.S. soil. And like you said, there's so many examples of this that have already happened. I think of like our dairy farmers, right? I know our dairy farmers are completely just going through it. Dairy is one of those things that I know very little about it, so I'm going to speak very lightly or very high level about it. I just know those prices are somewhat regulated and they're subsidized to a degree, I think, as well. I think maybe even more in Canada, so more than here in the U.S. And I just know like it's super unprofitable to be a dairy farmer in the U.S. anymore, right? That's the punchline to the situation. And so, you know, for the three of us and our experiences and our, you know, limited circle of influence and all those kinds of things, like how do you guys think about food? How do you think, and I'm curious to know more, almost not more, but first from you, Dion, like, because I know like you and Michelle's Dion's wife, if you didn't know, you and Michelle like are very intentional about like the things that you eat and whatnot. And so do you ever think about, and you live in a big metropolitan area, Dion, you're in Atlanta, right?
Yeah.
So Atlanta's also very southern, right? It feels very connected to its food, right? Other than like maybe like in New York or something like that. And so
Yeah, sure.
what's it like being in a metropolitan area like Atlanta and still being in the South? Do you feel connected to your food, where it comes from, not where it comes from? How do you think about those kinds of things?
So overall, well, first I'll start since you kind of went with the dairy thing. I've noticed, and it's very recently, probably within the last month and a half or so, there are pretty much on both ends of town, if you're kind of driving like 75, 85 north and south, which will take you basically from Florida to Michigan. There are billboards actually that they're huge. They're black billboards with white writing, and they say nut milk is not milk, right? So like that initially is the first thing I thought of when you brought up dairy farmers. I'm like, the dairy farmers are fighting back. Like the milk industry, like dairy milk is fighting back, right? Because they're like, nut milk is not milk in these big letters and those black and white billboards. So, you know, that's definitely a thing. But I would say overall, I mean, yes, I would say connected because we do have a plethora of what we would call farmers markets, actually. So people are able to bring, you know, literally the stuff that they just pulled out the ground yesterday or this morning to these locations and be able to sell on the free market at, you know, whatever prices they choose or that's fair. Obviously, you know, consumers are not dumb per se, so you can't just come and be like, oh yeah, this watermelon's $10. Like, no, bro, that watermelon's $4, you know. So, you know, of course there's that. Also too, just from the metropolitan standpoint, there are many restaurants and different things like that. A new restaurant opens every 2 weeks, right? So the big push over the last few years has been the whole farm to table style of dining. And, you know, being in the South, we do have a lot of farms, different types of farms, you know, crops, animal, you know, kind of across the board, etc. Obviously, certain things we don't have like a lot of coins, things like that. But so that's been a big push over the last few years is the whole farm to table. So in Atlanta as well, outside of that, we have a very large like vegan and honestly, I feel like vegans have trumped vegetarians, you know, and I don't know if that's like nationally the thing, but in Atlanta, it definitely is. Like, you can't go on social media without seeing something. Oh, vegan this, vegan that. This place is vegan, brand new this, da 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 da. We've got a few restaurants. One is called the Slutty Vegan, actually, and yeah, the Slutty Vegan. So they make you know, all of the stuff, right? Chicken wings and burgers and da 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 da. But it's not, none of it's meat, right? Yeah. But their line is out the door, down the street, every day, all day, right? They have a food truck if they're at certain events. Line long. It takes you 2 hours to get a burger, and people wait in that line to get that burger. And I've had it. It tastes good. Like, it's not bad. I won't cap. I'm not necessarily personally gonna just go eat it every day, but it does taste good. So the food scene here is definitely to your point, connected to things that are natural, things that are pure, so to say, you know, not so much synthetic or different things like that. So it's interesting. Yes.
I have a question for you, and it's going to trigger you.
Oh God, okay.
Is the food scene in Atlanta legit, or is it because it's like craft beers? Is it because it's the cool thing to do? Is eating vegan and all those kinds of things in Atlanta cool, or is it legit?
So I'll put it this way, because what we do know is that vegan is not new. So I would say that it's become mainstream, if that makes sense. So I would say the wave as far as fatty and the cool thing to do, sure, there's an element of that as to the people who may come on to it. Yeah. But overall, I would say it's more mainstream because because people who are in that lifestyle, who have been in that lifestyle for a long time, now have public options. So it's mainstream now. And so, yeah, you get your people who are on the wave. Oh, well, maybe I want to try a different type of diet and try vegetarian, try vegan. Sure, let me dib and dabble, but nah, not really, because I'm finna go eat this steak. But then there's the people who have been on this who can now actually go out with their family to eat and not have to cook it at home.
So I got one last big question for us, and you just inspired. This is the best question I've ever thought of, and in my own mind, I'm nervous because I don't even know if I know how to actually articulate it. So you're gonna have to walk in my shoes here. You use the word mainstream. There are people, not saying I'm one of them, not saying I'm not one of them, but there are people who think that like what becomes mainstream, what becomes pop culture starts in the Black and brown community. Hip hop and things like that make things cool, make things mainstream, right? I'll use some examples like even Tiger Woods in golf, right? Yeah, like made golf mainstream, or certain things in music, certain things in food, and all that kind of stuff makes things mainstream. How or is it possible? And it's something that I think I'm excited to try to do, and it might be even my like edge in this whole situation, is how to make farm life, how to make agriculture, how to make some of these things that we're talking about, how to make a mainstream. Is it the Black and browns community to make these things, or I should say, is it up to us to make it mainstream, to make it pop culture, right? Like I think of, most of where our food comes from, especially here in the US, comes from like old white guy farmers, right? And so how does that conversation really start to shift when people who look like the three of us, who look like us guys, who start to like change that conversation? Is that when we start to see a big shift?
Honestly, I would say, yeah. And the reason I say that is because, when you just kind of look at statistics as far as spending, in the US alone, it said that our community, the Black community, et cetera, has the highest rate of spending from a consumer standpoint across all ethnicities, however you want to put, whatever label you want to put on it. So when you have that type of buying power, and you introduce that money to a new thing and it goes there, it's automatically gonna either distort positively or negatively the numbers or the statistics of that thing. So yeah, if you make farming cool, and we also know that from a global standpoint, hip hop pushes the culture and it actually sticks in other places globally. When and if you can do that, then yeah, the money is gonna go there. Right. So it's like the stock market. When the hedge fund decides they want to jump into this stock, that stock's going to skyrocket. And when they sell big and it's going to plummet. Right. So if you put our community into a thing, the money's going to go there and it's going to become mainstream because more people are going to take it serious to be like, well, if they own it, it must be something worth it because they buy everything. Right. Or whatever, even if it's stereotypically positive or negative. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think in farming, so I work, I work on a work group, which I'm not going to mention, but one thing that we do is we highlight a lot of diverse BIPOC communities within agriculture. And one of the things that I always have a hard time is finding Black farmers to highlight because there just aren't that many. At least there aren't Black farmers that have gone, I guess, mainstream or that I could like easily find or access. So, I think that we do need more people of color, more Black people, more Indigenous communities, I guess, just people that look like the US. to be in farming and not just be represented by old white men, which is currently what it is.
A heavy statement. That's a heavy statement. More farmers who look like the U.S. Our people, what comes from looks like we're. That's deep. That's a whole nother beer talk.
And I will say, just in my limited experience with it, and this is more so about kind of land and, you know, large land ownership, whether, you know, I mean, a couple acres is large in general, but there are a lot of Black people who own a lot of land that possibly could be farmed. But my experiences have been most of their land is more so like horses, animals, you know, especially here in the South. I can count on one hand, but I'm still surprised when I see it to a certain degree of, you know, Black guys and groups of Black guys who are like on horses riding around in the city. And it's just like, bro, like, where did you bring that horse from? First of all, you know, et cetera, et cetera. But it's just like, oh no, like I'm a country boy, such and such and such. You know, we got land in Alabama, South Georgia, whatever. We've been riding all our life, you know. So it's kind of, I would say right now, most Black people, I guess, are in that space more so than actual like crops and planting and farming and things like that.
Space.
Right, not in a production space. And if they are, probably very very small percentage or a small percentage of their land. And those folks are probably being very local in what they're doing. So it's like, there's no, like, you wouldn't find them because they're not on Google, right? Because it doesn't matter. You know, I sell to Miss such and such down the street at the market, and you know, I feed my family and I get the rest of the market, you know, type of thing.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of, and here actually in the city, to that same point, there are a lot of community farms here in the city that do grow crops, cabbage, you know, greens, some of the stuff that you would typically see in the South. So if you ride through a lot of, like, especially on my side of town on the west side.
I have to stop you because baby's crying at the door.
Oh, go ahead. On the west side of Atlanta, Northwest and Southwest, you will see a lot of community farms, just literally in neighborhoods, in people's backyards, with signs like, hey, West Side Community Farm or Westview Community, you know, plot, whatever. So Black people are growing food, but they're very niche. They're very like, my people, you know, I'm not trying to go and have a contract with Walmart, like,
yeah.
But the West Side gonna eat, right? And don't nobody need to know about it either. that's kind of the thing too, that you may be, you know, coming across as not being able to find these individuals is because they don't want to be found. Like, they want to take care of their people where they at and keep it moving. Because as soon as you get involved, it's some BS, right? And that's just kind of the mindset.
There's a reason for people to feel that way, because that's exactly what happens. As soon as you get involved with big corporations, you are somehow indebted to them, right? So just going back to like our earlier conversations, when corporations get involved, it's not good for people. It's not good for anyone, except for those corporations. Joe, I think we need an introduction.
Yeah,
I need an introduction.
This is JC3, the future farmer of the Clark family, probably, or he'll be like an accountant or something.
He'll be an international soccer player that owns farms.
Yeah. Did you put up a question asking that? And I remember like seeing
everybody
that.
Thought he was going to be a farmer. I said farmer. Everybody thought he was going to be a soccer player.
I saw that.
People.
Look at him. He looked like Lionel Messi over there.
It's because he's light skinned. Everybody's like, soccer player.
It's funny.
That might be it.
So cute.
Rude.
But he do look like Messi though. Look at him. Pull up a picture of Lionel Messi right now. You'd be like, oh yeah, that's not Joe's kid.
I'll do it in post edit. I'll put a picture right over my face. Lionel and see if they look alike.
Gian, you mentioned something about the food scene at Atlanta. I was actually in Atlanta for 8 days at the beginning of the year. I was working on, there was a little political campaign happening in your state. And so I was down there working on that. And I just remember, like, I hadn't been to Atlanta. Maybe like the last time I went was like 5 years ago.
Okay.
And when I was there this time, oh my God, the food scene had just completely exploded. And like the craft beer scene, everything. I was just like, this is a new Atlanta. But
Foodie
then
town.
that made me like think about, you know, all of these areas, even though like the food scene has exploded. I know this is a completely different conversation, but everything's super gentrified. So you get all these like pockets of really cool like food experiences, but when you go there, all you see is white people, and Atlanta is not white. Like
Yeah.
it was like a weird like cultural
Yeah.
experience for me.
For sure. No, yeah, that's absolutely true. White peoples have definitely they're all over the place, obviously, and to that point though, and people do see Atlanta as this black metropolis, in which it is, but even with that, there is a very high population of white people here. And I think people kind of forget that when they kind of have that side of Atlanta, because everything Atlanta on TV is black.
Right.
But we are still in the South, right? So there's that. So it seems weird, but it's not. But you're right though. These areas do get gentrified. The markets come in. You know, you've got all these cool little places. It's expensive, et cetera, et cetera. And you see white people there. Now, on the same side, and me and Joe actually had this conversation coming back from Denver at the airport, that the cool other part of Atlanta too is that there are places that you can go where you will see black people, and there will only be black people there, and it will be of a higher end or upscale, middle scale type of atmosphere, type of people. But there are still more places that you can go from a number standpoint where you will see all black people, and it'll be kind of on the lower end of things, what people would consider hood per se. You know, because there's a whole south side of town with plenty of restaurants, plenty of bars, plenty of clubs, plenty of places to frequent. But if you are if you come from a certain background, even if you're black and you go there, you're gonna be like, like nothing happened, you know, nobody got killed. Like it wasn't like it was fighting and shooting and nothing like that, but it just wasn't what I was looking for. You know what I mean? So we're still kind of on that, you know, pendulum of, okay, how far have black people come into a upscale style of life? You know?
I mean, the class divide is still persistent.
Yeah, absolutely. So income definitely drives a lot of that. But even outside of income, because we know the money is there, the buying power is there, it's mindset. You know, it's a mindset thing of not wanting to, you know, change or switch up, or I'll go as far as even to say sell out, but I'm gonna keep that on the light end because it's not even that deep right now. But yeah, you know, because I mean, I've been to some places with some folks who haven't kind of made that mindset shift, who go to a lot of the places like you may have mentioned, maybe even Krog Street Market, Ponce City Market.
That's where I was, like every day.
Yeah, Krog Street Market, great place, right? They aren't comfortable. They aren't comfortable in a place like that, as cool as it is. You know what I mean? It's just like, how do you not like this? Like, this is bright, it's nice. You got all these food options, it's a whole bar right here. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's in a liquor store. Like, come on. Like, what do you mean? Like, and so they kind of just be like, okay, whatever. They look the same way that a person like us might look if we went to that side of town and went to a place. So it's always very interesting with that socio-economical mindset and that divide, if you want to call it that. But also at the same time in Atlanta as well, it's not a black versus white place. And I'm sure you may have probably experienced that. Like, it wasn't like, oh, a black person walks into the room and everything gets quiet. Yeah. It's definitely not that. It's just that a lot of black folks aren't comfortable per se to go to those places. And also, strangely enough, it's like they don't even know about it almost. And then you get exposed to it and you're like, oh damn, okay, yeah, I'm finna go to Ponce City Market. Like, but then you get called bougie by your friends, right? So that's the life we live in right now.
But Atlanta's a really cool place.
Absolutely, I love it. I'm trying to get Joe to move down here. He keep thinking we all big city, like we some New York or something like that, but we not.
No, it's definitely not that.
I told him we're still a tier 2 city. You know, we're making our way up there, but we're not LA, Chicago, New York, Miami, San Francisco. You know, we get into that status. We are international, but we're still on the tier 2 status, I would say.
And what is Tampa? Tier 3?
Oh, it's not on the list.
Yeah, Tampa is interesting, actually. I'll just say the
Tampa's
least.
a weird place.
It's on the lower end of tier 2, though. I would say it's on the lower end of tier 2. But Tampa's just different, bro. Like, you in the middle of Florida, so you don't have a classification, you know.
That's a different kind of conversation for another time.
Yeah, Florida doesn't fit into anybody's boxes.
You should have a talk just called Florida, like just on Florida, and talk about all things Florida.
Yeah, outside of Miami, though, honestly, like, Florida doesn't fit in any box.
That's fair. Maybe that should be our next one. Let's call it Florida.
Florida.
What's to argue about
the 5 states of Florida
with a Florida area code?
You're right. I still have a Florida area code. 813, baby.
So, guys, I know we're a little over time here, but I super appreciate both of y'all's time. I know, speaking for both Dion and I, Nat, we super appreciate your time and educating us on stuff going down in India. I don't think we solved any problems today, but maybe just a little bit more education will plant a seed, at least in our minds, especially my mind, and maybe someone else's mind, where something happens differently in the future that wouldn't have happened based off of maybe something as simple as us having this conversation today.
Yeah.
I have a question about India. Kind of to go back on that topic. I didn't get a chance to jump in there on that. What is the business culture of India? Is it kind of capitalistic where a person can go out and start a corporation like you can here, you know, just go and fill out the paperwork, pay $100 and get an LLC? Like, what is it like from that aspect? Do you know?
I don't know. I know it is a pretty capitalistic country, or at least it's it's an aspiring capitalistic country,
Okay.
if that makes sense. I think everything outside of the agricultural market, you see, I mean, you have like deep foundation of capitalism. So yeah, I think it's pretty similar. But you know, that's about as much as I can say.
Sure. So would you think, though, so since it's possible, would you think is the debt that these farmers have kind of a barrier to being able to maybe come together, merge, couple 3-acre farms, come together, start a corporation all under that umbrella, and then be able to kind of fundraise and do more things from that side to kind of combat some of the downships, I don't know what that means, but some of the hardships that they're facing, to kind of combat that from a get up and go standpoint, more so than a protest at the Capitol thing. Not to say that one is better than the other, but
I don't think there is a desire to merge or expand the farms by having farmers come together. I don't know for sure, but based on what I've been learning, I think most farmers just want to be able to farm their land and feed their families, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's just very basic. They have very basic requirements, which is, I have a family, I have 2 kids, a wife, maybe parents, and I just want to be able to make enough money and be able to feed them. And it's literally like, when I say, like, these farmers live the most simplest lifestyles.
Mm-hmm.
You can't even, none of us here in the US could live like that. And it's just the basic needs of just being able to feed their families. I don't think there's a desire to, go and expand their farms or go and merge with other farmers or try to become a corporation. I think it's just a very simple desire of, I have a family to feed and I want to feed them.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
But just the last thing I wanted to say, just another, like, Joe, you'd asked earlier, what can we do? One thing that I've been doing is just raising awareness. I think that's like the simplest thing you can do. Educate yourself and raise awareness. The next thing you can do is, if, as you learn more about the protests and see all the human rights violations and the abuses that are happening, we as US citizens should be calling on our elected officials to make sure that they're condemning India. India is a democracy, and that's why, you know, the US has the relationship it does. But just because a country is a democracy on paper doesn't mean that we should continue to stand, you know, and be silent, right? Stand with them and then be silent. Like that just doesn't work. It shouldn't work for anyone living in the US. Any human rights violations or abuses that are happening, particularly in democracies around the world, we should be making sure that our elected officials here are holding those countries accountable. So that's like the next thing you can do is just reach out to your elected officials and make sure that they are taking the action that they should be taking. But happy to like share more information on that, how you can do that,
For sure. Don't forget to send me those links.
Yeah. I will send you an email with all the stuff for people to get up to speed.
I'll put them all in the description of this.
Awesome.
Cool.
So, Dion, I don't think you ever told us what you were drinking.
Oh yeah, well I told you, but I am drinking locally actually. Sweetwater Brewery, local to Atlanta, the 420 strain G13 IPA.
Nice. So I think we can kind of cheers to that and sign off from here. We're gonna have a long one this round. I think we're at like an hour and 12 minutes.
That's awesome. Yeah, definitely.
You can go ahead and edit out some of the things, shorten it up.
Oh yeah, I'll probably.
We raw around here, baby. We straight out earth.
All right, you know what? Keep it all in there. It's fine. It's fine.
Farm to table around here.
All right.
Oh, whoa! Before we go off, Dion, happy early birthday! I know your birthday is tomorrow. It's Dion's birthday. You guys.
Happy early birthday!
What do
Are you gonna share what number this is?
It's like 50, right?
Yeah, I'll be 50. Right. Me and Joe went to high school together, and I'm gonna be 50.
Nice.
So I guess I got kept back a lot of times, right?
A little slow. That's okay.
No, I'll be 31 tomorrow.
31.
Yeah.
Nice. I turned 31 in January. It feels weird.
Does it?
Yeah,
No,
it does. Because now you're like stuck in the 30s.
Yeah,
Well,
it's like,
we're
here for a while.
You were stuck in the 30s since you was 29. Don't get it twisted. Most definitely.
All right.
So yeah, man, I appreciate y'all. This was great. Yeah, I appreciate it. So I appreciate y'all. This was great. Until it's not Beer Talk episode 2 in the bags. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment. Let us know what you guys want to hear about. If you like this conversation, make sure you subscribe to Poppy's World. This is where this will be hosted. Until next time.
Until next time. See you guys.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Guys, don't tell anyone, but I just pretended that I didn't like this. This was actually really good. Lagunitas Super Cluster, a Citra hopped mega IPA. I like a mega IPA. Guys, everything's changed. Everything. I thought I hated all IPAs, and if the guys find out, this is gonna be bad. But this was, I'm ashamed to say, it was delicious. It was crispy. It was flavorful. It was full-bodied. It didn't taste like ass. We have a problem.